Yes, thank you particularly to Penny MacDonald for it's a set of emails between us sort of instigated us doing this for Australia. So I'm really happy to be here, and thank you, Penny, for passing the word, and David Moore as well, and everybody else who's passed the word out. Thank you so much. Who's here from New Zealand? Anyone here from New Zealand? I think there was.
Kia ora, Margaret Collins from New Zealand.
Splendid, lovely, thank you. And anyone from Tasmania?
Yes, Craig from Tasmania.
Lovely, hello. Penny. And Penny, of course, yes, yes, lovely.
Wendy, Olympia, LP.
Hello.
Hi there. So, welcome to everybody. And can I start by saying, can you raise your hand if you do have a copy of my book, actually in person already? Yes, that's and raise or put the thumbs up or the hands up as well. Good. So a lot of you do, but I'm also seeing that quite a lot of you, I think, don't yet. So that's fantastic. So just getting a sense of, you know, who knows what, as it were. Good. And so if you'd all like to put your hands down again, and can you raise your hand now if you don't know anything about my work, you've simply been enthused to come along? Who's in that category? Margaret, hello, yes. Anyone else who doesn't know anything about my work and is here to know more? And your screens have all gone blank on me, so you'll have to raise your little, I don't know why this is happening. I seem to be losing people's videos. Yes, Helene can't raise the hand. I think you do it in, can somebody shout out how to do it?
It's in reactions.
Reactions. At the bottom menu.
Yes, good. Okay, Craig, Alex, yes, thank you. So there's a few people who don't know anything yet. Good. Okay. So let me start. I suggest that I start then by talking about where I come from and about a general idea about the book. And then, so I'll maybe talk for 10, 15 minutes at most, and then I'll open the floor for you to bring your questions, your discoveries, your excitements, whatever, and we'll get the discussion going. Okay. So yes, I did a zoology degree originally, and always interested in whole animals and how systems fitted together, ecology, and then discovered Alexander technique, fell out with science, and thought I'd left science behind forever, and took my first lessons in 1983, and they were Carrington teachers. And then I realized straight away I wanted to train. So the Carrington schools all had long waiting lists, and I discovered Misha Magadoff, who was a MacDonald teacher. So I swapped camps, because in the 80s, the MacDonald and the Carrington camps absolutely did not talk to each other. It was completely split. It was ridiculous. I understand that split never reached Australia, which you're very lucky to have. Yes, so I had a great training, loved the MacDonald work with its oppositions, its building of strength. There was a lot of vitality there, a lot of play. And then I finished, built a practice, and within 6 months, my use had fallen apart because I realized I'd never learned to work on myself. And I realized I needed some new input. So that's what took me to Miss Goldie, who lost no time in telling me that I knew nothing, that I was almost a fake. She would come out with sentences like, You ask me that, and you call yourself a teacher of the Alexander technique? Why, Mr. Alexander would be turning in his grave if he could see what you were doing in the name of his technique. So fortunately, I already knew how to shed insults off me and just listen for the real truth underneath, which was, you're a mess, you're weak, you're not as strong as you learn, you'll never make a useful teacher unless you get strong, and I can sort you. And I thought that's good enough for me, because I knew I was a mess. So we began to work, and she just collapsed my back. The beautiful straight back I thought I had was, she showed me, was all holding. It was created out of tension. And within 2 lessons, I was back in a slump, and it was 6 months before I could sit up again. She rebuilt it so differently. She rebuilt it from the core. She rebuilt it from the inside out. And at the end, I had a truly strong back. And she brought me to quiet. I was always very nervous, always rushing, like so many of us. End gainer, anyone an end gainer? And she brought me to quiet, and she showed me the technique the other way up. Instead of being shown how to take the head, neck free, head forward and up, back lengthen and widen, she showed me how to come to quiet and then to intend and let the body go into movement. And the head, neck, back looks after itself. The primary control is discovered all over again. And I had been asking right from the beginning, how did Alexander discover the technique? I'm sure a lot of you asked the same question. And I can remember asking this of a head of training when I was first visiting schools. And she said, well, Alexander was a very clever man. We can't do that. And I thought, fudge, you don't know. So I worked with Goldie for 4 years, and then I was already trying to teach it to my pupils, trying to teach it to other teachers. And I thought, what have I got here? So I set about a 30-year journey, what has become a 30-year journey, to understand what was going on. And it took me to John Hunter, who I knew already from my training. And he'd worked extensively with Goldie and also with Erica Whitaker. And he did a series of workshops because he was also trying to understand what was going on here that was so very different. And I then went for workshops with Erica and went and met her. I then discovered Peter Grunwald's work. I already was doing natural vision work. Discovered Bob Britton, which led me into functional anatomy rather than the bits and pieces anatomy, which had always bored me silly. And suddenly here was joined up anatomy, which was interesting. I started some craniosacral training, and that showed me tensegrity, everything linking to everything through the fascia. And from that, I discovered Thomas Myers and the myofascial chains and how the muscles link up in the body to support us and stabilize us and move us. And in 2006, I was very, very ill and was more or less bedbound, housebound for 1.5 years, and then took a long time to recover after that. My system was very agitated. It was a sort of combination of a chronic fatigue episode, burnout from moving to Ireland, and also menopause, all rolled into one ghastly whole. And it was a lot building myself up from that, bringing myself back to quiet, bringing myself back into strength. And I used what Miss Goldie gave me of the come to quiet, let it show you itself. But it wasn't bringing my strength back, because Goldie had brought such strength about in me. And as she had been working, she was using a model of the body, I felt, that was totally unfamiliar to me. She was doing moves on me that nobody had ever done and that I didn't understand and I didn't know how to explain. And that was my missing bit at that point. And then Rosa Louisa put me on to Jean de Massuero, which I know a few of you in Australia have worked with. And his first lesson, he also had been asking the same questions, but he went more the biomechanical route, and he discovered what Delsart was really had really given Alexander, because as many of you will know, Alexander had trained in the Delsart system. He says it on one of his first business cards. And Jando has put together the set of pulls that he feels Alexander was doing for himself, and were one of the ways in which Alexander was looking after himself, and how to use constructive conscious control with that. And the first lesson with Jando, any of you who've worked with Jando will know it feels totally alien. It doesn't feel like Alexander, it's too doing. And so my head was thinking, this is all wrong, this is stupid, this is not Alexander, and wanting to walk out. And another part of my observing consciousness was thinking, this is what Miss Goldie was doing. These are the alignments and indeed the pulls that Goldie was doing on me. And so I thought, here is my missing link. So I worked with Goldie, with Jando then for quite a while, and was able to put the final piece of the jigsaw in, which was what Goldie was doing biomechanically, what she was doing with the pulls, and how these strong pulls were used on the very first training course. The techniques become gentler and gentler and gentler, and the pulls really wake things up. They give us another set of tools. And so I began to get a complete picture of how Alexander had developed the technique and how we could do it for ourselves, because the technique started as a self-help method. Alexander said you're going to use conscious guidance and control to bring about a change in your own use. And then he found it very frustrating that people couldn't do it. And in about 1912, he discovered that by bringing himself to quiet, using his own work, he could then communicate it through his hands. And life got a lot easier for him because he wasn't fighting the pupil anymore. He could do it for them. And Lily Westfelt then reports that on the first training course at some point, he comes in saying, I can completely do it now for them. And his temper then stopped being a problem, because there are accounts in the early days of Alexander shouting at a pupil at one end of the room and AR shouting at the pupil at the other end of the room. Don't stimulate the fear reflexes. Where did that go? And it must have been a tremendous relief to him to be able to use his hands, but something was lost for us and we need to recover it. And at the same time as all that was going on, my old science head was asking, what's the science behind this? Because Goldie's work was so precise and Jando's work was then so precise, and it produced such a clear improvement in stability and coordination and strength and tone that I thought there has to be clear science behind that. And so that's been another journey, is to uncover the functional anatomy behind it. And Maya's anatomy trains really helped me understand what Jando was doing and put those pulls into an anatomical context. And at the same time, I was exploring the neuroscience. And now the science team, Tim Cacciatore and co, tell me what I've got are hypotheses and speculations. They're not proofs, because we have a piece of science and we have what we're doing and they seem to match. But I've come up with a whole hypothesis of what's happening for inhibition, of how Alexander's central discovery, I think, is that if we can cue the nervous system right, our bodies will self-organize. We will come into a more balanced, organized, stronger use. And the body will then move in a new way. And one can ask the question, why don't dogs have to go around saying, free the neck? Because they're using those self-organizing mechanisms. And that's what Alexander has helped us to find. And Erica Whitaker really showed me how the eyes are a crucial part of that. And that when Alexander was working, he was working a lot from his eyes. He wasn't just feeling it with his hands. So it's a big book, because as you can just hear from that, there's a lot I've put together here. It's taken 4 years out of my life. The index itself took 6 weeks of absolutely nonstop. So I hope you are enjoying it, those who got it. So, and it's out there now. And of course, the minute it came out there, then lockdown happened. And so I've been teaching it online to pupils, to teachers for a year in the online trainings. It's the same material, because it's great for, it's perfect for working online. It's perfect for working hands off. Pupils, the modern pupil needs to be able to do it for themselves. I think the old model where somebody just came for lesson after lesson after lesson after lesson after lesson for months and months and months, didn't quite know how to do it for themselves. The modern pupil doesn't want to do that. The modern pupil wants to know, okay, yes, they want a nice relaxing time as well, but they also want to know, how do I keep this going? What's it about? Why am I doing that? Why are you asking me to do something that feels all wrong, that's all strange? You know, why should I do that? And we can now explain that. And I think that's so important. And it's also, of course, completely valid for hands-on work as well, because it's clarifying our own work and what we're doing for ourselves. We can really work on ourselves, and then we can be much clearer through our hands and our psychophysical use for the pupil. So it's the whole. I'm not advocating just online like some people are, or you know, it's for the whole of our Alexander journey. So let me open the floor to everybody else. Who would like to question or comment or ask for clarity on one of the explorations? Wave a hand at me. I've got two screens, so it's easiest if you do put a hand up, because then you'll come onto my screen. And so who would like to set the ball rolling? Jill.
I'd like to challenge you really to explain your quite controversial approach to posture, because it's your approach is very different to what we've all become accustomed to, what's alignment and balance and perfect posture. I think that's the first great challenge in the book.
Thank you. Yes. So for those who've got the book, I think what you're referring to, Jill, are the pictures that are on pages 47 and 48. And I'll actually share them on the screen for those who haven't got a copy of the book in front of them. So that's what we think of as good posture. This is the standard picture. But actually, if we look at it with Alexander eyes, the head is slightly pulled back. The chin is slightly raised. The chest is raised. The back is slightly arched, and the whole of the superficial back line of the body, this myofascial continuity that Thomas Myers has defined, which is crucial to our work, that is shortening. This whole line right the way down to the heels and the plantar fascia. Somebody who has a really arched back may not be able to get their heels to the floor when they sit down. So this is my new understanding. And it looks wrong. You look at it first and you go, that's all wrong, because we have faulty sensory perception. We have a habit of what we're used to seeing. But what we've got here is the head going forwards and up, so that the eyes actually are now, the nose is now level with the ear, which I think is where actually we're supposed to be, that the base of the nose and the base of the ear are level. If I'm there, it's pulling the head back, and that is lengthening the neck, and then the whole back lengthens up afterwards, and the whole legs lengthen as well, and the feet can extend, and the whole of this back line of the body can come into play. And to me, these two images really show why the head leads the body into extension. And you can just play with that for yourself a moment. If you let that head fall back on the neck and the secondary curve come in the back, you'll feel everything shorten. And if you let that head go forward and up, you feel the whole thing lengthen out. And if you're perceptive and you do it standing up, perhaps you might feel that happen right down to your feet. And I'm sure many of you will know that one already. One of the points that Jando makes is that when the chest is raised, that's actually bringing more of an input, more of an emphasis on the front of the chest, and but it's stiffening the rib cage. And actually, oops, sorry, went the wrong way. When the chest, actually, when the ribs come down in this way, the sternum comes vertical, then the back is much more emphasized. The lungs, the arms come in front of the lungs, and the whole lung mechanism can come much more into play because we have far more lung tissue at the back than at the front. And it completely revolutionizes breathing. But again, it's an unfamiliar place for the arms. But this is where Goldie was putting my arms. And if you read in Man's Supreme Inheritance, I think it's in one of the parts of the back where he's talking, doing case histories, he says that there's this small boy whose arms are behind his lungs, and that the arms need to be in front of the lungs, and then the back can come fully into play and the lungs can come fully into play. So anyone else? How does that sound, Jill? What's your reaction to all that? Because I've thrown a lot of stuff there.
You've actually just cast a bit of light on a pupil I saw yesterday, who I haven't seen for 18 months during lockdown. This lady's done a lot of work with me previously. And she can sit on her sitting bones and support herself, but she just commented in the lesson, and I'd just taken her to the chair, everything was fine. She commented, she said, now I feel the temptation to bring my feet further forward because I'm starting to feel tension in the front of my legs. So we did a little bit of experimenting with different positions of the feet, but you've just now cast light on that for me. Because although her back is working and she can sit without leaning into the back of the chair, she's probably still arching her lower back slightly, which is why she's not comfortable to let her heels touch the floor.
Yeah.
So it's all about lengthening the back line, isn't it?
Yes, you've lengthened it right down the extenders of the back, the leg as well, and then she's happy to let the legs extend and the torso really support the body. Yes, lovely. And again, it's in Man's Supreme Inheritance that Alexander says the legs always need to be in that position where they can support the torso. We're not just supported on the torso when we're sitting, we're also supported right from the legs. The legs are always, excuse me, I've got a frog, always working, which was a point Goldie would make to me over and over again. The whole body needs to be alive. Your legs, she pointed out to me how I would sit down and my legs would just go to sleep. And she would say, no, bring your legs awake. And she said that Alexander would go around the first training course saying, your knees are intelligent and your knees aren't intelligent. And people were going, what? But what he meant, as she showed me, was that when the legs are not just working, but you're embodied in them, they actually come conscious. They're part of your whole conscious being. So this is another aspect that we want, we don't just have intelligence up here, the whole body is intelligent, and we want the legs to be part of that intelligence. And lengthening them is the first step to that. Because if they're not lengthened, if they're contracted, we're not going to get anything in there. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else want to jump in on that? Anne, do you have a hand up? Anne Shearbridge, would you like to unmute?
Okay. The button wasn't working. Lovely to see you.
Yes.
Penelope and everybody. Yeah. So thank you for the session and for the book, which I am going to buy but haven't yet. What I'm interested in is this time where we're all having to teach online, at least in Melbourne we are, and people, I think, are spending so much more time with their heads engaged with a screen and their bodies disengaged. So the reinforcement is very much with the eyes and the head and forgetting about the body. And I'm finding myself talking to people about the difference in feel when I'm asking them to bring that body knowledge, that body intelligence into it, describing that as a different flavour. And I just wondered how you manage that, please.
It's one of the real central problems, isn't it, at the moment? I quite agree. It's a real challenge. I find that different keys work for different pupils and even for myself on different days. One day I might be aware of my shoulder blades. Another day I might be aware of my belly breathing. Another day I might just be aware of my feet on the ground. But legs working is something I keep coming back to, because if the legs are working, the torso, you know, joins in, and then the whole thing. So it's great to start with the other end. You know, I think again, if we're very head centered in the technique that leads, but that can only lead because it's opposed by the pelvis, and below that by the feet, and also by the hands. You know, you might all like to explore the moment if at the moment, are your hands actually limp? And just wake your hands up in this moment. And what changes? Anyone notice anything? Anne, do you notice something there?
Yeah, waking the hands up just enlivens the whole upper limb and the upper torso. So then it feeds into everything else.
Yes, yes. So I sometimes think one just needs to wake one bit up and everything else has a chance to follow once the pupil joins up. Of course, to start with, pupils aren't joined up. You need to wake up their hands and wake up their feet and wake up their knees and wake up their breathing. But for us as teachers, hopefully, we're more joined up than that now, and one can work with one bit and everything else goes, oh right, yes, I'm awake. But yes, I think my nervous system needs change. Again, we're sort of given this one stage route to change: neck free, head forward, up, back lengthen, back widen. I have a system that gets bored easily. You know, I hear that 3 times and it's very exciting, and then the nervous system's going, bored of that, give me something else. So the book probably has 2,000 ways of doing of cueing into the system. Because again, the thing about a tensegrity system is that everything joins to everything. So you can enter from any point. We don't just enter from here. We can enter in by, you know, a dancer knows, you know, if they think hands leading into a movement, the whole body will follow. If the system is joined up, you can lead in from any point. Breathing is a fantastic lead in. Yeah. Any more? Does that answer your question, Anne, or you want to say some more? Yeah, thank you. Yeah. Meredith, I see your hand.
Hello. So if that's about wake, and I'm sorry, I don't have the book yet, but it's on order. You were talking before about how important it is to quiet the system. And for me, that's like super important. So do you have like, can you talk us through quietening your system before you would begin with waking the system, right, with the extremities?
Yes, lovely, thank you. So let's all do this together. I use the eyes because there's now science showing, in fact, that the eyes are one of the quickest ways into quietening the whole autonomic nervous system. Everybody knows the phrase autonomic nervous system, I guess, the sympathetic, parasympathetic, you know, fight, flight, rest, digest, whole system. So I want you just to imagine a feather on your nose that goes right out. It's an extendable feather, and it goes out to something in your room and it tickles it. And just let that feather tickle what you're looking at. And there's a space along that feather. It's got all those little wisps. And so let those wisps be a little bit apart from each other. So you're one end of the feather, and what you're looking at is the other end of the feather. And in fact, you can take that feather through to the back of your head, because that's actually where our visual cortex is. So it's not just a nose feather, it's a brain feather. And then it's tickling what you're looking at. And you might even get a sense that you're not just seeing the thing now, but you're actually experiencing its texture and its color and its form and its shape. You start to see it like an artist does. You start to see it as it is. You become much more present. And the eye never wants to fix on one point. It always has to be slightly moving in order to keep the retinal cells awake and changing. So you're just letting that feather tickle along, and it's gently tracking. It might track around the object, and then it might track to the object next to it. And then each point that you're seeing, again, the feather is encouraging your 2 eyes and your attention to land at the same point. Because so often where our eyes are, our attention's actually somewhere else. And indeed, very often we're only really using one eye. Even people who have perfect sight in two eyes, very often one is the dominant eye and it does the work. So be aware of your non-dominant eye actually being part of this as well. And everything is focusing at one point. But with this space, so we're not tunneling down onto it, of course. We have the space back to us. So we also have the peripheral vision. So you might have a sense of the room either side of you, the space from you to what you're seeing, and the space of the room around you, the space behind the object, and even the space behind you, above you, below you. And then we have what a man called Philip Shepherd, who I didn't actually mention, who does a lot of embodiment work, amazing embodiment work. He calls background and foreground. Always we need the foreground, what we're paying attention to, and the background together. Because if we just focus on the foreground, which is what we do into a computer, we just funnel into that computer, and that actually is quite overstimulating. It's over-engaging. And the minute we keep in this wider view, we're more laid back, shall we say. We have more perspective on the system. We can see the whole context. And the eye can just track along, and tracking eyes sideways, so that you might notice that the head actually starts to follow. And this is again where you find that the neck muscles are just self-organizing. I don't know what's going on here. You don't have to organize your neck. You don't have to do anything. The eyes lead and the head follows. And this is what I say. I mean, when I say the eyes organize the system for us. And is that quite calm? This is the basis of EMDR, which is a method that uses tracking of the eyes in order to clear traumas. And so it brings really quite profound calming to the system. And as you're doing that, just to add to that, does anyone start to become more aware of their own body? That actually there's what you're looking at, the bigger space around it, and then there's me. So I become part of the scene as well. Because so often if we're just in the computer, as you say, we've lost ourselves, we've lost any sense of ourselves, we are no longer there, we're just in that tunnel focus. When we come into this wider perception, then I become part of the scene as well. And then I come into relationship. And everything is actually in relationship. The cat hunting the mouse. You know, if the cat lost themselves, they wouldn't be able to hunt the mouse. The cat is in relationship to the mouse. The sight of the mouse is calling the hunting shape and the behaviors out of the cat. But it's relationship. The two are in a dance together. And this is, again, what Goldie wanted of me, to come into the present and let what I'm doing draw this self-organizing out of me. So I've got this calm place, which is brought about primarily through vision, and then that goes into breath and embodiment. And how are you finding that, Meredith?
Lovely, I feel much better, thank you.
And this is a tool you can use anywhere. You know, somebody once asked Dr. Bates, who started the natural vision movement, when should I do my natural vision work? And he said, there are as many hours in the day for seeing well as there are for seeing badly, which is a real Alexander sort of sentence. So, you know, you can track round your dishes as you're doing the washing up. You can track the road in front of you as you're driving and be aware of the road at the side. You know, we can use it in the supermarket. This is always available to us. Anyone else like to comment on what happened for you there?
I noticed my breathing improved greatly
Lovely. Yes, yes. Because again, the breathing is part of, once the system calms down, it allows that whole free movement to come into play, because that is intrinsically a tense place, isn't it? And it grips the lungs. Yeah, and the minute we come back. So we have these 3 points of attention, the primary focus, and then the two other are peripheral awareness. And I think of the body mostly as peripheral awareness. I want the body always, the whole body always in my peripheral awareness. Anyone else like to comment on that? Mary, I see you've got your hand up, Mary Cerny.
Yes, it was getting back to the legs, actually. When I was training, I come from a dance background, and there's no way I could, my neck was stiff, that was all. And the more I thought of freeing my neck, the stiffer it got. So in desperation, I started freeing my ankles and found that somehow everything in between then started freeing. So I have this idea that once you encompass the whole of yourself and the directions within that, you can come into it from any place. You can free your wrist, and that will resound through your whole body. When it's like you open up the pathways through your body, and then what you do anywhere in your body, which of course automatically has a detrimental effect, well, you can use that, you can turn it around and use it in the opposite direction. So that by freeing my ankles, I was able to begin to get a sense of what it was to free my body. And at the moment, I'm working with groups of people who are spending a lot of time watching theoretical things on Zoom, a lot of lectures that they're having to go through. And so today I was suggesting that they create dances with their feet on the floor and let the feet move the legs wide and move them back in and do little tap dances, on the floor or through their ankles and their heels also, to enliven the legs, to enliven the pelvis, to get something going there, that isn't just that deadening, but what I felt in that exercise that we just did, just how wonderful that whole, how enlivening to the body to have an awareness of the whole periphery around you, then those whole levels of just sitting in front of the screen, because their use has just deteriorated so tragically from my standpoint, and to try to get them in an enlivened state rather than sitting up straight and feeling like they have to hold themselves there. Yeah, so the next time I see them, I'm going to work with that kind of way to get so they can, I keep saying it's a good opportunity because it's such a deadening stimulus that it's a good opportunity to expand and create, go to your sense of play and creation, that while you're sitting there having to take in what's going on in this lecture, that you maintain an aliveness in yourself in whatever means that you can find, and at the same time be present there to what you're supposed to be listening to. So I just the little that I know of your work, I've ordered your book, but I'm in Sydney and we have a shutdown on the postal system at the moment, so I'm not sure exactly. It's not shut down, it's slow or something. I'm not sure when I'll get it. But just the little that I do know, I've really loved, because it was encompassing that sense of the whole and the aliveness in the whole body, sort of all at one time. That yeah. So I stay away from a posture, or I'm a lot more that it's yes, but it's also changing all the time. That it has, as the freer that we are able to get in our joints throughout our whole body, that there is a built-in kind of an aliveness that comes from that communication of movement in the joints as we go. So yeah, it's great.
That's
Thank
beautiful. You said a lot there. Thank you. That's a lovely input. Yes, I was very aware in my training that even before I found Goldie, was that, you know, everybody was trying to get me to free my neck, but my hips weren't present. And if I realized that if the hips weren't embodied and free and moving in balance, how are you ever going to, you know, the body is built from the ground up, and it's also hung from the top down, and both are true. And biomechanics is perhaps more aware of the ground up stuff, and biotensegrity is more aware of the hung down side. And it's not an either or, both are true. And so we can work from either end, but it's a question of which the key is. And for anyone with grounding issues or tension issues, I think we often have to start from the bottom, and the ankles are a very powerful place. Let's all just play for a moment with feet. Just be aware of your legs, and now just drum them up and down. Just bounce your legs up and down and drum on the ground a bit. That just brings your feet into a lively play, and then let them come back to quiet again. But don't immediately let the tone out of them. Be aware of how the minute you stop your legs moving, they will tend to go a bit soggy. And can you keep that? And if they've gone a bit soggy, bounce them again, and then just let them come to quiet and let them stay enlivened. How is that? Does it feel like you're doing an unfamiliar amount of work now in sitting? Anyone like to comment? Craig, you're nodding. Would you want to comment there?
I'm a bit of a nodder. Yeah, no, I definitely noticed it. It was a nice amount of extra work. It wasn't painful extra work, but it felt a bit more like I was sitting rather than collapsing, if that makes sense.
Oh, absolutely. But it's an unfamiliar amount of work in the legs, isn't it? And
It is indeed, yes.
What Goldie, thank you, Wendy. Good to see you. What Goldie showed me was how we've all been encouraged to release the arm, release the shoulder, release the legs. But that's fine for having a good night's sleep. But it's not much use for, you know, lifting a child. We actually need to have a lot more tone in the body. And to start with, I was completely thrown by her wanting me to hold all this more tone in my legs, in my shoulders, in my arms, and it felt tight because it's faulty sensory perception. We don't know where tone stops and tension starts. But there's actually a very simple way of determining that, which is, you know, just try swiveling on your legs. I mean, I'm on a swivel chair, so I can swivel easily. The joints move. So I haven't tensed them. I've toned them, but I haven't tensed them. If it moves easily, you haven't tensed. So we can bring that extra tone in. The minute you start engaging on your computer again, you'll probably let that tone go. As I say, no switching off was Goldie's phrase. And it was a hilarious moment. I was outside the door waiting for my lesson one day, and I heard her saying the words that meant she was taking the pupil inside into the chair. And she had such a strong voice. You could hear every word she said. Couldn't hear the pupil. And I then heard her explode as she got the pupil to the chair. Now look at you. You are like a sack of potatoes. No, that would be insulting to the potatoes, because potatoes have life, and in this moment you have no life. And then I could hear her prodding and coaxing this poor woman back into life again. And I knew exactly what she'd done. She'd got to the chair and then she'd let go. And that was not allowed. You had to get to the chair and stay with exactly the same amount of tone that you'd used for getting yourself there. And that's unfamiliar. I did wonder whether the woman would come out crying or laughing or smiling. She came out smiling, so she'd obviously heard it all before, which was nice. But yes, it's unfamiliar to keep tone, but keeping tone is keeping presence, because tone and presence go together. And the extreme of that is if we lose consciousness, if we go to sleep, we will fall off our chairs because we cannot maintain enough tone to sit while we're asleep. But at the finer point of that, real presence involves real tone, and real tone involves real presence. So if I'm present in my hand in this toned way, this hand is also conscious, and then it's more sensitive, and then it's more alive to touch, and so on. So we're present with our whole beings, and that's what we want, even while we're watching a lecture that's theoretical. Plus, I've now got one of these swapper chairs that bounces as well. It's great fun. It's much more enlivening. But just try sitting on the edge of your chairs. I don't know how many of you are sitting back on the chair. Just sit right to the edge of the chair. And notice whether your torso now has more possibility for dynamic movement. And then sit right back on the chair again. And notice what the difference is there. Comparison is fantastic. It's always great to work with pupils with comparison, I think. And now sit forward again. And again, compare. Where does the torso have the freedom to organize itself and to keep its muscles alive with this continual movement that we would do if we stood on one leg? You're very aware if you stand on one leg of the muscles having to, continually adjust to keep you there. And actually that's happening even as we sit, or can be. What are people aware of on this one? Can anyone feel a difference? Anyone want to venture a hand? Jill? You're muted?
I always sit on the edge of the seat because I hate that sack of potatoes feeling which is how you sit on a sofa, isn't it? When you sort of collapse into a sofa.
Yeah.
I don't as a rule collapse, but one vital thing I've learned with you, is that even though my torso is toned when I'm sitting, I've learned how to still switch off my legs. So it's very nice to have a refresh, to think about alive feet and toned legs, and not simply letting go of the legs.
Yes. And it's something we just have to keep remembering, because we all had 14 years at school where we were made to sit still all day, every day. Katie Bowman, if anyone knows Katie Bowman's work, Move Your DNA, she actually says it's our most practiced skill that we learned at school. Isn't reading, isn't writing, isn't maths. It's how to sit still and stay still and not listen to your body. It's what we had to learn to survive school, or we got told off. So we learned to switch off and not listen to the body. And here we are reversing a lot of years of and early years of conditioning here. Anyone else like to comment on this or anything else? Helen, hello.
I always find that if I go to a cafe, when we used to be able to go to cafes and restaurants, I'd always end up perching on the edge because the chairs sloped backwards, so I'd sit on the edge. But even in other places, even if they're half good chairs, I usually choose a stool rather than a chair with a back, because I think even though I know how to sit, the back of the chair always sort of beckons and draws one in. Yes. So it's for me, it's much better to sit on a stool.
Yes.
And then I'm not tempted.
Yes. Yeah, I agree. I'd much rather sit on a stool. Interestingly, that was another thing Mary said, that sitting not being a static posture. And Erica Whitaker told me that she was once in a concert, and she said there was this young man sitting in front of her with his feet out to the side and his hands, in the classic position. And he sat absolutely still all concert. And she thought, that's an Alexander teacher. And she had the whole concert wanting to give him a push because she saw he was fixed. And we're not supposed to be fixed, are we? And she was always moving. Her eyes were always moving, like Alexander's in that little film. And he's alive, he's moving. And sometimes we can get into this is the right shape, and it becomes a bit China doll and precious, doesn't it? And it is, it's alive, it's moving, it's dynamic. And we're much more about activity than I think we sometimes remember. We're not just about lying down. Yeah, thank you. Any other comment on that, Helen? Or Meredith wants to come back. Yes.
Well, I was just going to say, I not only have school, I have 40 years of sitting on the front of stools to play my instrument. So I'm really, really good at sitting on the front of a stool and arching my back. So it might be really good. But I feel like I'm finally getting there. After about 6 years of work, I finally am able to sit on the front of a stool and not arch my back. But for me, I have to play with my sit bones all the time.
Yes.
So I can't have them be like you were talking about feet. Anyway, that's just I do this a fair bit with my sit bones.
Just to gently jiggle to keep things alive, you mean? Yes, why not? Has anyone who's read the book got into any of the chapter 6, the breathing stuff, where I discussed the thoracolumbar fascia and how we actually really come back into the widening of the back with the breath, and when the whole fascia, the whole thoracolumbar fascia, that base of the back wakes up in the lumbar region, it actually really supports the torso. And then we have a very solid base, not just on the pelvis, but in the lumbar spine. I don't know whether anybody's got that far yet, but that's something that Goldie gave me that at the time I couldn't understand. And what chair work is really about, I think, is about waking up this whole widening strength of the back that starts, that is all the way through. It's in different sections, you know, back. There's not enough detail there. I need to be back at the pelvis. I need to be back and wide in the lumbar, back and wide in the lower ribs, back and wide across the heart, back and wide across the armpits, back and wide at the top. There's lots of different bits of back and wide. And then, of course, it all joins up. And they've all got slightly different muscular involvements. And actually to work through each one is really gets the whole sense of where that back is. And then one can sit more still. And there's a dynamicism that simply comes from the breath and the legs, and it becomes a subtler movement rather than having to jiggle around. So there's a balance here, isn't there? Because we do also need to be able to sit still, but without fixing. And the dynamism comes from within. So how does that sound, Meredith?
I look forward to that. In however many years, I look forward to that.
Yes. Who else would like to talk about an aspect of this? Penny, you've been reading the book. You must have some questions.
Jack,
I wouldn't mind you talking about, and I actually saw you on a Robert Rickover interview you did where you were talking about the book, and you talked about how Miss Goldie really got your legs feeding into your body. And that actually really struck me and was one of the reasons why I then went and ordered the book. And I'm sort of playing around with my teaching now, but I'm wondering if there's something you can talk through that a little bit more in standing. Maybe we can all stand up. But I just,
yes,
not a question from the book as such, but just something that I'm curious about knowing more about.
Yes, well, it is absolutely in the book. It's and it's a very important aspect. So, because again, when we're standing, just spotlight myself for a moment. So you can all see me better. This is a lot of complex stuff. I'm going to go through quite fast here. So you may or may not be able to do it all in one go, but have a go. When we're standing, very often we're in a slight secondary curve, as we saw from that. I'm using Nettle Foyle and Vanier's descriptions that come out of Dart of saying that's the primary curve, the fetal curve, and that's the secondary curve. And that picture I showed of a right posture, you know, head back, and chin up and chest up, and it takes us into a secondary curve. We arch back, and we also tend to sort of the hands turn out a bit, the feet turn out a bit. And we're not doing that as Alexander teaches. Of course, we're not stiff in that, but very often there's a vestige of that still there. And it actually means that the torso is not properly linking to the legs. So Miss Goldie was always tapping me here and here. And I didn't understand at the time what she was doing, but I now know she was working on the iliac spines, which are a real point where the ASAS at the front of the pelvis, which is a real point where an awful lot of muscles connect together. And in particular, the belly muscles, the transverse abdominis and the internal obliques both come through this point. And if we bring these back, then can you see my pelvis actually starts to come out of the secondary curve and actually starts to come to a more of a neutral place. And I can also think the pubococcygeals forwards at the bottom. I can think my sitting bones going down to my knees. The hamstrings go from the sitting bones to the back of the knees. And if the hamstrings gently pull down, again, that's gently opening out that lower back. And it's all bringing that more upright. And then the torso starts to sit much more securely on the legs. And if you then allow a long out breath and let an in-breath happen, you might feel it happening right the way across this region of the body. Because most people, they breathe down to here, they might breathe down to here, but they rarely breathe right down to the base of the body. This is the level of the sitting bones. It's a long way down. It's much further than we think. We tend to sort of mentally stop the torso at the hip joint, but actually we go right the way down to here. And so this is where the pelvic floor comes to. Thank you, Leo. So just stay with that a moment. See if you can, again, the transverse abdominis, you can think of it coming that way. But it's actually a muscle that does that. It brings this back. You might feel this whole area widening and your tummy flattening, which is a real bonus. What it's actually doing is putting the organs in the right place, and it's stopping the breath spilling you forwards. So we're getting all the belly muscles really engaged. The obliques, the transversus are all coming into play. Then the rectus abdominis does its own thing. We don't, of course, the one when we think of working the belly muscles, we think of doing that with the rectus abdominis. That pulls us down. We're not doing it with that. We're using this transverse abdominis and the obliques. And then that gives support in this whole region. Sitting bones to the back of the knees, pubococcygeals slightly forwards, the pelvic floor slightly drawing forwards. It's not push the bum under, which is that. It's drawing the pelvis into a more stable, more upright place. And then see where breathes. And then you might start finding the breath actually starts to travel down into the legs. And then we start to activate the psoas muscle, which is, of course, goes from inside the groin over the front of the hips, over the front of the pelvic bone, and dives onto the side of the lumbar spine. And I won't attempt to talk through that now, but we're linking that in as well. So we've got that internal support, the QLs come into play, the iliacus come into play, and the whole area tones up. And then when you bend, you've got, if you bend, keeping all this back as you bend, so that we're not just bending from the hips, but we're bending from this region here, you get a very different, very much more supported bend. Now, Penny, how did you find that? Because I've been through a lot very quickly there.
We did, and what was, apart from that feeling great, and that feels like that answered heaps of questions when people want to talk about core and strength and, you know, about what is strengthening or not. But where that's really helped, we've just been playing in the training about not falling forward. You know, when we hinge over, we tend to drop into our front. So it's really helped keep that sense of how you keep the back going. So yeah, that was great. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else have an aha moment with that, or get stuck and not be able to do it for that matter? Don't be shy. There are no stupid questions. Jack. Hello, Jack.
Penelope, I've got the Kindle edition because I didn't want to wait a month to get your book. The book will get here eventually. So I've been through quite a lot of the explorations.
Great.
And I've found them really, really very useful. I've got a problem though of integration. So a lot of the pulls, which I've done, which are very useful, and I find very useful, I've found, even though you've got a sequence in the book of how to then get from something quite dewy to be able to integrate it into your system, I've had a lot of difficulty in actually doing that. So I found something working very well. So you can talk about the arms and the strings that you put on arms, that sort of thing, and the legs. But when I try and integrate it, I can't seem to make that transition that easily. So it's a matter of being able to integrate what you learned with Miss Goldie with the John Doe stuff. There's a little gap there which I can't seem to transcend, because if you leave it as a Dewey thing, it starts off as a Dewey thing.
Yeah.
It's not that integrated, and you tend to hone in on a particular area. But then to integrate it into the whole pattern of your existence, it's quite a challenge. And I haven't done it very, I haven't managed that very well. So what would help me, but you may have other ways of doing it, is to go through one of the explorations, maybe one of the shorter ones, but I was thinking perhaps of the one with the feet where you're sitting and you sort of invert the feet and you have them outside parallel. And I found that particularly challenging, number one, for the reason I've said, but number two, you don't have a QR code for that one. And I found your videos combined with the text are extremely useful because it brings out stuff, when one actually seeing what you're doing and in the flesh, so to speak, that you don't quite get from the written page only. So it's to make that transition, which is my question to you, even though I've been through your sequence.
Fantastic question, Tony. Yeah, Jack, sorry. Yes, fantastic question. Because as you say, I mean, this is why we've shied away from, say, just doing a pull for the elbow, because that's where the mind goes. So my first question to you is, how did you find the mind in the brain? Because again, mind in the brain is a concept I got from Goldie, and it's so valuable because the minute I do a pull to the elbow, my mind tends to go and down into the elbow. So, and you might all just try that, just stick your elbow out and sort of give yourself imagine there's a string on your elbow and just give your elbow a little pull with that string and just taking it out to the side. And you'll probably find your mind has gone down into that point. Now bring your mind right back to your brain. And your brain isn't just here, your brain is right the way up here, right the way up to the top of you. Bring your mind right up here and look out like we did earlier with the eyes tracking around and really seeing. And while that's happening, you're just going to send an email now that your elbow is going to do a pull, and you're not going to go there, but you're going to let something do. You are going to do something, but you're not going to involve as you do it. So it can help to hold the hand on the head to keep the mind up here. That's it, because our minds just slip quietly down while we're not looking. That's right. The minute we stop paying attention, can we keep the mind up here and out there and let the elbow pull? Tony, does that, sorry, somebody just called Tony put a comment in the chat. Jack, does that do anything for starters? It's not the whole answer, but
that comes across strongly in your book.
yes.
But I find that some of the explorations are so precise that it's hard to actually keep to that letter of the law, so to speak.
Yes, yes.
Especially the ones that are more challenging for me.
I think the feet ones, I mean, I'm not going to go through it with the feet because the feet are probably the hardest to do it with, to do this integration with, because we stand on our feet all the time. They have such powerful habits And to bring about a change, say the screwing the ankle move, it's a powerful move, and it's quite a while, personally for myself, I found, before I could do that without having to go down there and do it. And of course, the moment came, but it took a while. So it may partly be that your body just needs to go through the anatomy one more time, one more time, one more time. But I have another little game to play, which is, if you've got two, this one isn't in the book actually, but if you have two juggling balls, can you throw and catch them both at the same time? Yeah. And what does it take to do that, Jack? Can you?
Well, you've got to have a fairly wide vision, firstly. So you've got to integrate more than one particular spot.
Yes.
And yeah, so you can't be all that hyper focused, really.
No, you can't put your attention in all of them, in both at once, can you? You can only at that point look forwards and trust that this action is happening for itself. But you are doing. This is not a non-doing, this is a doing. We're throwing a ball.
Yeah.
We're throwing two balls, we're catching two balls at once. And so this is what we want when we do three pulls at once, is we want to keep the mind out of the way. And we are doing, say, the pull to the elbow and the pull to the hand back and the pull to the sternum up all at one time. And they all happen together. And I can't be, and they're in three different planes, because this one is coming out and round and forwards, and this one is coming back to the side of the body, and this one's coming forwards and up. So we've got, you know, you can't get your mind going in all those different planes at once. You just can't do it. So you have to really familiarize the body with the play, with the pulls first, which is where the anatomy play comes in. And so the brain really knows what it's trying to do. And then you say, okay, go for it. And I think it's like, you know, do you remember that point when you first learned to drive the car and you got shouted at because you were driving forwards and you weren't properly paying attention to the gears and the dog on the side of the road and the man behind and the traffic lights in front all at once? And then suddenly it came, and one could somehow keep that multi-focus, which we have to do while driving. And I think this comes if you build it up. And maybe just try integrating two to start with, even just to do the elbow on its own, because there are three pulls there, outwards, forwards, and down all together. And can you keep all three of those going before you then add the wrist back, before you then add the sternum up, and certainly before you then add the lower body pulls to it? So maybe build it up more sequentially. How does that sound?
A lot of work to do, but I'm on the road. Thank you.
Yes, yes. And then there comes a moment when you're walking down the road and you just think about one of those pulls and the whole lot comes into play. And that's when you know your nervous system has joined up. When the nervous system now has a concept of the whole. And that's what we're going towards. So we're doing these pulls along the way to wake things up and get things going. The first time that happened for me was one of those. I was doing a workshop, I think in Britain, and I was walking down this endless airport corridor. I was probably walking down corridors for about 20 minutes and thinking about eyes leading me, and suddenly everything came into play. The eyes were in spatial, brought me into spatial awareness. My elbows turned around, my feet turned where I want, the belly muscles came into play, the pelvis came aligned, everything came together. And I thought, but it was probably 2 or 3 years work to get to that point. You know, this is a whole waking up of the system that we haven't done before. So do allow time, you know, but at the same time, you're getting benefits straight away. So it's not like you have to wait 3 years for the benefits. But it slowly the integration comes.
Thank you. Very useful.
You're welcome. So we probably have we're running out of time here. So I'd like just to say that I'm running a book club. Now I know, Penny, you have your own book club there. I understand you're going to study the book there, but I also have a book club, and there's a new group starting on Monday, where we meet every fortnight, every 2 weeks, and we take people take their own speed, but we're working through the book. I get everybody joined with another student so that they're working through the explorations together in an exchange every week, and not just exploring those pools and minding the brain and nose feathers and all the other things that are in there. There's about 200 explorations in the book. So there's a lot to work through together, but also learning to verbalize it, learning to instruct another person, learning to observe it. And those are skills that I don't know about you, but certainly I didn't get on my training course, of how to verbally take a pupil through a procedure and how really to observe whether they're doing it. And also then how to get them to give me useful feedback. You know, how was that? Yeah, okay, tell me more. Yes, okay. It feels nice. Yes. How is your neck? Longer. Great. Now we're getting somewhere. Actually, to get people to verbalize is a really important part of their own process. And again, it's something we haven't been taught to do usually. So working it through with another teacher is a really useful thing to do, to make it your own and to really learn these new skills before you try it on a paying customer. And so we, in the book club, people can bring their queries and their questions. We can work through some of the explorations together, just as we have today. You know, how does this work? We've done them in very sort of much brief today, but we can take longer over them. And there's also quizzes and questionnaires so that you can check whether you've understood the chapter. There's little anatomy challenges. I've done my own sort of anatomy coloring book with it, as it were, the sheets, so that you can learn the functional anatomy, because it really helps if you actually know what the superficial back line is. And then you can explain it to a pupil from a place of the pupil. You don't need to give them the Latin, but it's useful if you know your muscles. And it's essential if we then want a conversation with a physio or a doctor, that we actually can start talking to other professionals in a language they understand. I think this is another aspect that we need to, as the technique as a whole needs to get much more up to speed with, and I think that's happening. So, and of course, if enough of you in Australia wanted to do it, we could even put on an Australian time, but because at the moment the book club is 2 o'clock UK time, which is a fat lot of use to Australians. But some people who are here today actually have signed up, and they're going to be doing it. Just, you know, they'll have an exchange partner, and they'll watch the recording of the session and send in questions on email. And there's a Facebook group as well where people can again throw out questions. And so you know, people who are doing it remote are still part of the group. So does anyone want to ask questions on that? I'll send you all an email afterwards with the link for it if you want to have a look at it.
And so Penelope, it's Penny. You so you would you be prepared to do a time that's suitable for Australia, which would mean something like, it was this time, it's 9 o'clock in the morning for you.
Yes, and after the end of October, it will be 7:30 in the morning. It'll be 7 o'clock in the morning, but that's fine. If we made it 6:30 for you, then it would be 7:30 a.m. for me, which I'm an early person. So in fact, we did that before when I did when lockdown first happened and I did the first online training. We had an Australian group then. Helene's here today and she was on that. So yes, I could do Mondays or Fridays if that was of use, if that worked.
Well, we're going into daylight savings time shortly. So does that change it, Penny?
Yes, that's right, because you go an hour forwards and I go an hour back.
Yeah.
That's why I say it goes from 9
Gotcha.
to 7 a.m. So if we could go with your 6:30, then that would be 9:30 and then to 7:30 for me, which is just that bit easier than 7 a.m. But as I say, I could offer Mondays or Fridays if you wanted to have a look at that. We'd need sort of 12, 15 people to make it viable, but if you wanted to look at that.
Yes,
I'd love to. So if in your email you can send, an options, and we can reply and let us know the cost and everything. And then hopefully we will get 12 or 15 people. Because I know for me, I don't go back and watch a recording. I need to be participating. So yeah, that would be wonderful if we can. And we can always advertise it in our Ausstat newsletter for people that aren't here now as well.
And we could set a start date for something like 3 weeks' time to give us time to pull it together. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because there's Rick and Jane are both signed up for Monday morning, but for Monday afternoon, but you might want to, swap into the Australian end. Yeah. Okay, lovely. Well, I'll send an email shortly and we'll see what works. I mean, is there a simple idea of, is a Friday afternoon good for you, or is that Friday evening is not always the easiest time? Is there a simple, who's interested in a Friday evening? Let's just throw that one out. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I've got people on the second screen. 6, 7, 8. Yeah, so we're starting to get somewhere. Is Monday? What about a Monday evening? 1, 2, and put your hand up if you can do the same. 3, 4, 5. I think 6. Yes. So 7, 8. So we'll throw out. We'll. There's no clear answer there, is there? So I'll put both options in the email, and then we'll get a dialogue going and see what happens. Yeah. Okay.
I have one question about the book club.
Please. Yeah.
Is it how is it translatable into a kind of methodology for teaching online? A pupil who is like new or something like this.
Yes, the sequence in the book is absolutely, well, I say absolutely because different pupils have different needs, but it is a sequence you can roll out. So chapter 3, you start with just simple, feet under the body and knees a bit soft, and getting them to be aware of how they move in and out of a chair, and then the basis of freeing the neck and how to let the eyes lead into a chair. And then chapter 4 actually introduces spatial awareness with them and the sense of embodiment and in semi-supine. And chapter 6 then works on their breathing. Chapter 7 introduces the pulse. So you can absolutely roll it out as is. And in fact, there's when lockdown was happening, people were joining my online course because they were saying, help, I've got to do all my work with my college students. And they were just staying one step ahead with my course and just rolling the whole thing just out with their students, and it worked perfectly. Once you get the feel for it, you can mix and match more and say, well, this pupil really needs this pull first before this pull, or I want to do the pulls before the breathing or the pulls after the breathing, and so on. But you can actually roll it out straight away as and just stay one step ahead of your pupil. So, does that answer your question?
Yeah, thank you. So in the book club, the way we like you plan to discuss and do this discoveries, it just goes through the sequences. It progresses through the book.
Yes, basically, absolutely. Yeah. And I've also the book club, I think, is an affordable price. It's €25 a month, or 20 a month, €20 a month for anyone who's a little bit hard up at the moment. Your choice, and it's a subscription payment, so you can stay in. If it doesn't work, you can drop out. It'll probably take a year to go through the whole book, 9 months to a year. That's what we're looking at. Penny, did you want to say something else there? I saw you.
Just thank you for your book, and thank you for this time. I just wanted to let people here know that the Wednesday Ausstat Book Club is every second Wednesday. If they wanted to join our going through your book, but it'd be much preferable having you here, doing your one. But we are going to be going through it. If people want more info about that, they can email me or shoot. Yeah. And the other thing is, people in Australia, if they don't know, Terra Rosa is the distributor in Australia that Penelope's publisher uses. So if you want to get the book quicker, that they have stock in Australia at Terra Rosa. So you can go via that website, and it's easier than waiting for them to come from England. So they're my two announcements, and thank you, Penelope, so much.
Great. Well, thank you for that, Penny. That's great. And thank you, everybody. Thank you so much for coming this morning. It's a real pleasure to meet some people who I know your names and I've never met, and people here I've never met before. And yeah, and lovely. And let's see if we can pull something together, perhaps for ongoing Australia. Rick, you have something to say because you're. Hello, Rick. No, it's lovely to see your face too. We've had a little email exchange. Yes.
I was just clapping my hands.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay, so I wish you all a wonderful evening, and I'll be in touch later today. Okay.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Penelope.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you.